Welcome to the Deconstructionist Deep Dive.
The podcast that doesn't just accept the story.
We break it
We examine the pieces.
and expose the machinery inside.
Let's dive in.
What if the leadership principle hailed as the ultimate solution? I mean, the answer to all organizational dysfunction is actually a dangerous oversimplification.
Right, one that systematically prevents us from fixing what's truly broken underneath.
Exactly.
That is the core, I think, the really exhilarating tension we are tackling today.
Yeah.
We are driving a sharp analytical scalpel right into the heart of one of the most celebrated and, frankly, rhetorically powerful leadership doctrines of the last decade.
Extreme ownership. You really can't avoid it.
No, you can't walk into an airport bookstore without seeing this concept staring back at you. It's everywhere.
Our mission today isn't just to criticize, though. It's to really deconstruct. We need to understand why the doctrine's simplicity makes it so instantly attractive, so marketable.
And why that very simplicity, that single focus, causes it to, well, shatter when it encounters the multi-causal, messy reality of large, complex civilian organizations.
Totally.
Our source material lays bare the incredibly compelling anecdote that founded this doctrine. You have to understand that first.
You do.
But then it ruthlessly tears apart the assumption of its universal applicability. That's the critical move.
Our goal here is to move past the myth, past the personal virtue aspect almost.
And give you, the listener, the tools to identify when extreme ownership is being used legitimately. Because it can be a powerful tool for solving problems.
Sure.
Also when it's being deployed, maybe often unintentionally, as a weapon.
Yeah.
A way of shifting organizational blame away from flawed systems and onto individuals.
Right, protecting the status quo. Okay, let's get into it. All right, section 1. Let's unpack this entire architecture. We start with the core definition, and it's demanding.
It really is.
Extreme ownership, EPO, it's a leadership philosophy that asserts the leader must take total, undeleted, absolute responsibility.
For all outcomes within their purview. That's the kicker.
That's the critical distinction, yeah.
Yeah.
Even for failures where they had no direct operational involvement. Maybe they weren't even physically present.
It is an intense commitment, isn't it? Almost like a religious level of commitment to accountability.
Yeah, and that intensity is key to its appeal, I think.
Definitely. The foundational axiom here, the underlying belief, is that true leadership efficacy is predicated on the leader's ability to completely subjugate their personal ego.
Right. Ego gets thrown out.
You have to subordinate it to the imperative of responsibility. You are essentially removing the self from the equation.
You can't say that wasn't my department or, oh, that was just bad luck. None of that.
No excuses. You must own the result, period.
And we have to give credit where credit is due. This isn't just abstract philosophy floating around.
No, not at all.
This doctrine is built on a specific, profound, really high-stakes narrative.
We absolutely have to delve into the foundational anecdote that built this entire movement. The Ramadi friendly fire incident in 2006.
Yeah, if you don't grasp the severity of this event, the context, you don't really grasp the power of the doctrine itself.
It's the central piece of evidence, and the full context is crucial. We are talking Ramadi, Iraq,
Right.
at a time when the city was truly the epicenter of the insurgency. That's not an exaggeration.
No. Operations there were not clean surgical strikes. They were brutal, complex urban warfare.
You had multiple friendly units operating in incredibly close quarters, often communicating across different radio frequencies, different rules of engagement.
Yeah, a recipe for confusion. Iraqi soldiers, U.S. Army infantry, Marine Corps teams, Navy SEALs, all in the same tight space.
The environment was practically engineered for failure, wasn't it?
It feels like it, yeah. The catalyst was the very definition of the fog of war.
Yeah.
Just escalating into catastrophic fratricide.
A series of small errors, right? A breakdown in situational awareness here.
A poor judgment call by a forward element commander there.
Crucial delays in cross-service radio communication. Just bad comms.
And all of it compounded with just sheer bad luck. Wrong place, wrong time.
The result was devastating. A friendly unit was mistakenly engaged by another friendly unit,
Blue on blue. The worst nightmare.
resulting in one friendly killed in action, multiple others severely wounded, including a SEAL.
The mission was instantly suspended. High-level, potentially career-ending investigation launched immediately.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. This is where the doctrine is truly born.
Right. During the intense pre-debriefing, the internal investigation, the senior leader is facing this catastrophic failure.
Which was Arguably caused by diffuse errors across several different commands, right? Not just one person's fault.
Absolutely not. But he steps forward. He doesn't point fingers, doesn't blame the comm, doesn't blame the other units.
He identifies the singular point of failure as himself.
His pivotal realization, the thing that sort of changed everything for him was, I am the senior man on the battlefield.
Therefore responsible for everything.
Every single error, from the miscommunication to the flawed tactical movement, is my fault because I failed to put a system in place that would prevent it.
Wow. That's a heavy burden to take on.
Huge. He took the blame fully, publicly, and crucially, upward to command. Didn't try to hide it.
The narrative payoff of that single act is just immense. You can see why it resonated globally. Our sources detail the immediate claimed results. So upward, the act of total ownership reportedly shocked higher command.
You can imagine.
And then deeply impressed them. It increased their trust in his integrity.
Right. Instead of dodging, he owned it.
And downward, within the team, it completely stopped the internal friction, the blame shifting that must have been started.
Instantly. Reinforced team cohesion. Everyone rallies around the leader who takes a hit.
And crucially, operationally, it enabled the immediate implementation of new, necessary tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs.
Without all the bureaucratic drag and finger-pointing you'd normally expect after a disaster like that.
Exactly. We're talking about changing the very fundamentals of how they operated, potentially overnight.
Like instituting a specific, maybe redundant communication protocol, demanding standardized visual identifiers across all supporting units, things like that.
Concrete changes. The failure didn't lead to just recrimination and punishment. It led to immediate, powerful, systemic change.
All because the leader absorbed the political consequence, took the heat.
It transforms this tragic failure into a story of moral, ethical, and even operational success.
Yeah.
Fueled entirely by a single decisive action of taking ownership. It's presented as the ultimate antidote to that typical corporate culture where everyone looks around the room asking, okay, who can we fire for this?
And I absolutely acknowledge the rhetorical and moral strengths of that. It is a powerful narrative about selflessness, about integrity under extreme fire.
It is.
But here's the fundamental challenge we have to confront now. Can one high-stakes, life-or-death scenario,
Deeply embedded in a unique, highly controlled military culture,
can they truly dictate universal doctrine for every single civilian corporation, nonprofit, government agency out there?
that leap of faith?
Yeah, that jump from Ramadi to your quarterly budget meeting.
Or your software development sprint.
That is the structural vulnerability we really need to deconstruct next.
And that leap is exactly where the doctrine stakes its entire claim, isn't it?
It is. It proposes direct, almost magical transferability from the battlefield where, the immediate constraint is death.
To every other domain imaginable. Corporate management, team leadership, parenting, personal finance, you name it.
The proposed mechanism is simple. And because it's simple, it's deeply seductive. Take the blame, own the failure. And that act, in and of itself, somehow leads teams to victory.
Enhances a leader's integrity, builds mutual trust, guarantees problem resolution.
It feels like this universal master key, right?
Right.
Just turn it and all your organizational problems unlock.
Provided you have the moral fortitude, the guts to actually turn it.
Right. But this is where we have to pause and apply that skeptical lens we talked about.
We need to examine the structural vulnerability that's inherent in that beautiful simplicity.
This brings us to what we're identifying as the single pillar flaw.
Okay.
The doctrine relies axiomatically on one single massive principle. The leader takes the fault. That's the pillar holding everything up.
And by doing that?
By doing so, it forces a monocausal explanatory model for failure.
Monocausal, meaning one cause.
Yeah, translated into everyday language, it
Wrong.
means that no matter how many different things went wrong, bad strategy, poor resources, market shifts, whatever, they all ultimately trace back to that single person at the top.
And what is the immediate dangerous consequence of imposing that simple model onto a complex, multi-causal reality?
It actively and efficiently obscures the systemic failures. It hides them.
Right. If the leader absorbs 100% of the responsibility.
Everyone else is immediately off the hook. No need to look further.
And crucially, the system itself, the bad processes, the flawed corporate structure, the inadequate funding model, the toxic culture is protected. It doesn't get examined.
You're only looking up the chain of command for the solution, for the point of failure. And you completely missed the failures that are far beyond any individual leader's immediate span of control.
Okay, let's think about that in a corporate context. Say a big product launch flops.
Right. Classic example.
The leader of that division takes extreme ownership. They resign, they apologize publicly, take the hit.
Yeah, falls on their sword.
But what was the real root cause? Maybe it was a flawed grand strategy developed 5 years ago by a board totally disconnected from the market.
Or maybe it was inadequate R&D resourcing, dictated by an executive team focused solely on short-term quarterly profits.
By accepting all the blame, that litter, maybe even nobly, shields the board, the executive team, and that flawed investment structure from ever needing to change.
Yeah, the system remains untouched. In highly complex, decentralized, or politically charged environments, which, let's be honest, describes almost every large modern organization. Authority and causation are naturally diffuse. They're spread out. In those contexts, those collapse contexts, the doctrine of extreme ownership just fails to provide a meaningful diagnosis.
It provides a moral shield for the organization, maybe.
Yeah, exactly, while sacrificing the leader. And that leader, through their, quote, noble act, actually prevents necessary reform.
Okay, now let's pivot slightly to the evidence supporting this massive conceptual transfer. You mentioned the Ramadi story is key.
It is.
Yeah.
But is it enough? We call this the epistemological weakness, basically the proof problem.
The entire argument for universal applicability is constructed predominantly on that singular high-impact narrative, Ramadi.
It's the anecdotal mortar holding the entire structure together.
High rhetorical potency, absolutely. High emotional weight, undeniable.
But our sources highlight a really stark deficiency here.
Yeah.
The lack of diversified empirical reinforcement needed to generalize the principle. You need more than one data point, right? You absolutely do. Where are the longitudinal business studies showing sustained application of EO across various industries, tracked over decades?
Where's the psychological research on ego, blame, and accountability, specifically in civilian contexts, that proves this is the optimal managerial response, not just a military one?
Or even case studies detailing the principle's failure or limitations. Where does it break down?
They're largely missing from the foundation. The doctrine essentially asks you to believe that because this principle saved lives and unified a highly specialized team under extreme duress,
It must therefore fix your HR turnover problem.
or your inefficient software development pipeline.
It relies entirely on the moral weight and drama of the anecdote to stand in for rigorous generalizability proof.
It tells a powerful, moving story about a heroic leader, for sure,
No doubt.
but it doesn't offer a generalized, scalable scientific model for organizational change across different contexts.
And we just have to maintain our skepticism whenever we're presented with a simple, singular solution to what are fundamentally complex, multi-layered problems. It usually means something is being ignored. The deeper we dig into this transference claim, the more obvious the contextual mismatch becomes.
Yeah, this is what you called the unexamined crypt, right? Where the inconvenient details of reality are buried.
Exactly. Let's compare the two operational environments rigorously. Just lay them side by side.
Okay. On one side, the source context, a Navy SEAL unit in combat.
Characterized by an absolute, legally enforced chain of command, orders are not suggestions.
Consequences are existential, literally life and death.
Personnel are not volunteers in the corporate sense.
Hmm?
They're homogenous, rigorously selected for specific psychological profiles, resilience, team focus, adherence to hierarchy.
And driven by a completely unified high-stakes mission where success equals survival, everyone's pulling the exact same direction.
Now contrast that with the target context, the modern civilian or corporate environment.
Membership is voluntary. People can quit.
Incentives are inherently conflicting. My personal performance bonus might conflict with the collective success of the organization or another department's goals.
There are internal politics, HR departments, complex legal liabilities, unions maybe.
And crucially, we're often dealing with knowledge workers, people who require autonomy, creativity, the ability to challenge the status quo that's their value.
You want them to speak up, not just comply without question.
Yeah, comparing these two. It's not just apples to oranges.
It's apples to uranium, as you put it earlier. It's fundamentally different physics.
The environment that created extreme ownership is designed to eliminate ambiguity, enforce immediate compliance under duress, and assume total authority for the leader.
Whereas the corporate environment is often designed, or at least should be designed, to manage ambiguity, encourage collaboration through disagreement, and operate within a massive web of legal, ethical, and political constraints.
Which brings us to the key intellectual error identified in our sources, the hidden assumption.
The assumption
That core principles transfer seamlessly between these vastly different operational environments without significant translation or structural adaptation.
It treats a principle derived from tactical combat like it's a universal law of physics, applicable everywhere, unchanged.
And this is precisely the danger in the civilian world, in your typical company.
Because
Because in the corporate setting, taking extreme ownership for deep structural problems or market shifts you can't control, it often just leads to leader burnout, professional immolation, really.
Why? Because you're accepting responsibility for something you genuinely cannot fix through personal effort alone.
Exactly. You can apologize until you're blue in the face for the broken hiring process.
But you can't unilaterally fix the national labor shortage that's actually creating the hiring problem.
Right. Or the outdated legacy IT system the board won't fund upgrading.
And worse, you actually protect the flawed system above you by taking the blame. You remove the pressure for genuine structural reform.
The moment the leader takes the blame, the board breathes a sigh of relief. Crisis averted. We found the failure point. It was him, her.
So they replace the leader.
Rather than fixing the budgeting process or the strategic planning process that forced that leader to fail in the first place.
Wow, so the leader becomes the martyr.
The scapegoat, yeah.
Yeah.
Absorbs the public flogging, clears the path.
For the deeply flawed organizational design, the processes, the bureaucracy, the political infighting to just continue completely unabated.
The individual leader is penalized. The organization learns absolutely nothing about its root causes.
And the system remains fundamentally broken, just waiting for the next leader to sacrifice. That's quite a critique.
It's a structural trap disguised as a virtue.
Okay, to truly deconstruct this monolithic idea, it helps to look back, right, at historical management precedent.
Definitely. This idea of rigid top-down control coupled with absolute accountability. It isn't actually new. We've tried variations of this before.
Absolutely. We have the sobering precedent of failure in what used to be called command and control, or C&C management styles.
Right, this stuff dominant throughout corporate America, say mid-20th century. Think Mad Men era almost.
Exactly. These were rigid, hierarchical, top-down approaches. The expectation was clear. The person at the top knew best.
And the job of everyone below was simply execution and compliance. Don't think, just do.
And they failed pretty spectacularly as the economy shifted away from simple manufacturing towards more sophisticated knowledge work.
The documented failures are well known, right?
Yeah.
Organizational rigidity, inability to adapt.
A complete stifling of bottom-up innovation. If you punish mistakes or deviations, nobody suggests anything new.
And widespread employee disengagement. People checking out mentally.
Now, to be fair, in certain very specific environments, like, say, a tightly controlled assembly line where safety is absolutely paramount, or maybe a surgical team where clear roles or life-or-death C&C is necessary.
Sure, context matters. The failure isn't C&C itself inherently.
It's applying C&C, that rigid top-down model, where what you actually need is autonomy, creativity, and critical thinking.
The root cause of that general failure, as outlined in our sources, was a profound misunderstanding of what actually motivates knowledge workers.
Their creative needs, their desire for autonomy.
Yeah, if you treat highly educated, skilled, autonomous employees like they're just interchangeable cogs who must simply execute a mandate without questioning the design,
They'll either leave for somewhere that values their brain,
or they'll stay, but they'll stop contributing those valuable creative solutions. They'll just do the bare minimum.
and the risk is that extreme ownership, if it's misapplied, if it's used simplistically without nuance.
Risks repeating this exact historical failure by overvaluing compliance and the absorption of accountability.
Over systemic improvement and fostering intellectual innovation and psychological safety.
Which brings us neatly to the most powerful and really diametrically opposed framework we have for thinking about organizational failure,
The work of W. Edwards Deming.
and the whole doctrine of systems thinking.
Deming's core principle completely flips the script on this idea of monocausal individual blame. It's a radical departure.
He argued that the vast majority, and he actually put a number on it, which is startling.
The 94% number, right?
Yeah. He stated that 94% of problems and failures in an organization are attributable to the system itself. The processes, the structure, the resources.
Not the individual worker or even the immediate supervisor. Only 6% is down to the individual.
That is a staggering number for a leader, especially one steeped in EO, to absorb. It feels wrong almost.
Let's spend a moment on why that 94% really matters, though. It's not just academic.
Right.
If you have a recurring problem, say 10 quality defects coming off an assembly line each day,
Okay.
the typical EO-ish response might be to find the person or people responsible for those defects, hold them accountable, maybe retrain them, maybe discipline them, maybe fire them.
You focus on the individual closest to the error. That's the 6% thinking.
Deming, however, tells you that statistically, 9.4 of those 10 defects were caused by systemic issues outside that worker's control.
Like what?
Maybe the raw materials supplied by procurement were substandard. Maybe the machine calibration drifts every few hours. Maybe the shift handoff procedure is unclear and information gets lost.
Or maybe the worker was given conflicting instructions from 2 different managers about quality standards.
These are all system failures. And no individual worker, no matter how motivated or well-intentioned, can consistently overcome a bad system.
This requires a radical shift in the leadership implication then. What does ownership even mean in this context?
Ownership, under Deming, shifts entirely. It moves away from being a personal, symbolic, moral act of accepting blame the EO approach
To being the practical, difficult, often unglamorous engineering work of actually fixing the broken processes and designing robust systems that prevent failure in the first place.
You stop asking who failed, and you start asking, how did our process allow this failure to happen? What are the system vulnerabilities?
The comparative advantage here seems clear and potentially transformative for organizations.
Absolutely. Systems thinking aims to create sustainable, scalable improvement by addressing the root causes of failure.
Rather than simply assigning blame to the individual nearest the explosion, who might just be a symptom.
The individual isn't usually the core problem. The workflow, the communication structure, the resourcing model, the training program, that's where the leverage for real changes.
So the core question fundamentally changes under this lens.
It moves from who must take ownership of this failure
To what hard, detailed engineering-like work must we do collectively to ensure the system itself never allows this specific failure mode to occur again?
It shifts the focus from individual moral integrity, which is important but insufficient,
To repeatable, measurable, systemic excellence. Fixing the machine, not just blaming the operator. Okay, so we can't just discard the virtue of personal responsibility entirely, can we? That sense of integrity, of owning your part, that is crucial.
No, absolutely not. That would be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The impulse behind EO is valuable.
So the question becomes, how do we renovate the doctrine? How do we keep the ethical force, the power of extreme ownership?
While adding the intellectual rigor, the diagnostic capability, and the scalability of systems thinking.
We need a synthesis.
Our sources suggest we need foundation reinforcement, moving from the singular focus of EO
To something we could call contextual ownership.
Contextual ownership. Okay, I like that. What does it mean?
We retain the virtue of responsibility, yes. Leaders are still accountable. But we mandate an intelligent diagnostic application before we accept blame or jump to a solution.
So diagnosis first.
Diagnosis first. And this hinges on asking the critical diagnostic question the moment a failure occurs before anyone speaks or acts.
Which is?
Is this failure fundamentally rooted in individual execution, team coordination, or a flawed system?
Okay, break that down. Individual, team, or system.
Think of it like a mechanic examining a car crash. Old school EO almost assumes the driver is always at fault, just bad driving.
Right. Own it, driver.
Contextual ownership mandates a thorough inspection first. Was it the driver who fell asleep at the wheel? That's individual failure.
Okay.
Was it the driver and the navigator arguing over directions, missing a turn? That's a team coordination failure.
Right. Interaction breaks down.
Or did the brakes fail due to a known manufacturing defect the company didn't recall? That's a system failure.
The appropriate response is totally different for each of those, isn't it?
Completely. Your action then becomes context-aware. Ownership means enacting the correct, targeted solution for the identified layer of the problem.
So if it's identified as a systemic failure,
Ownership means leading the charge to change the system, fighting for resources, redesigning the process, fixing the faulty manufacturing line.
not merely apologizing for the crash, resigning, and protecting the flawed manufacturing process that created the problem in the first place.
Exactly. You own the fixing of the root cause.
This multifaceted diagnostic approach seems to necessitate an entirely new model, though. It's not just one pillar anymore.
No, the single spire of extreme ownership isn't enough. We need to replace it with something more complex, more robust.
What we're calling the compound leadership cathedral.
A cathedral. Explain that metaphor.
Well, instead of one single spire reaching for the sky, you have a synergistic complex. Multiple interconnected chapels, each representing a crucial principle, all working together to form a stronger whole.
Okay, I see. The architecture is crucial because it ensures balance, prevents over-reliance on one single idea.
Precisely. It starts naturally with the chapel of personal accountability. You have to have that foundation.
This retains EO's core virtue, right? The leader is ultimately accountable for the response to the problem. Even if they didn't cause it directly, you must lead the fix.
But critically, that chapel must stand physically adjacent to and be balanced by the chapel of systemic design.
This is where Deming comes in.
Full integration of Deming's process focus. It mandates that leaders understand they must spend the majority of their corrective effort, that 94%, on structural, resourcing, and process corrections.
Not just on individual coaching or discipline. This is what ensures improvements are actually scalable and sustainable.
Then, we absolutely must include the critically important chapel of psychological safety.
Based on Amy Edmondson's work.
Exactly. To even diagnose those systemic failures accurately, team members must feel completely safe.
Safe enough to raise their voices, admit their small mistakes without fear of reprisal.
And take necessary risks for innovation. If you want people to find system flaws, they can't be terrified of punishment for speaking up.
Yeah, if your environment is too punitive. If leaders are immediately shot down for taking extreme ownership of a systemic issue they raise.
The truth about the system will never surface. People will hide failures, they'll obscure metrics, they'll only share good news.
Which means the structural defects, the 94% problems, will remain completely invisible to leadership until disaster strikes.
Psychological safety isn't just nice to have, it's the absolute prerequisite for effective systemic ownership. You can't fix what you can't see.
Okay, personal accountability, systemic design, psychological safety. What else?
One more crucial element, the chapel of adaptive context.
Back to the context mismatch problem.
Yes, this mandates the explicit recognition and adaptation of principles to domain-specific variables.
It's the formal acknowledgement that the operating model of a high-stakes military unit is not the same as the operating model of a software development team or a hospital or a school.
And the principles must be translated, adapted, questioned, not just copied wholesale.
This requires a big shift in how we even teach leadership doctrines like EO, doesn't it? Significant pillar modifications.
We have to move away from teaching universal application as the default.
And instead focus on developing translational frameworks. How do you intelligently adapt this principle?
Explicitly mapping the differences. What are the key variables in this new context compared to the original?
Let's use that mapping idea. A SEAL team operates with the primary constraint maybe being immediate survival and primary variables being speed and compliance.
EO works brilliantly there because it drives immediate, unambiguous execution under fire.
Okay, now a software team. Primary constraint might be market timing or user needs. Primary variables are creativity, collaboration, iteration.
An EO principle focused purely on blame and individual consequence might completely crush the creativity and risk-taking needed for innovation there.
You have to actively prove the principle works or how it needs to be modified in the new context. You can't just assume it transfers.
The ultimate act of contextual ownership, then, is maybe the intellectual honesty to admit that the principle that works perfectly in one environment might need to be radically altered or even abandoned to succeed in another.
That takes more courage than just taking the blame sometimes. So let's synthesize. What's the ultimate verdict on extreme ownership based on this whole deconstruction of the source material?
After digging through it all, we conclude that it is a powerful, incredibly compelling, but ultimately incomplete heuristic. A mental shortcut.
Its primary value remains undeniable, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It is perhaps the single most potent antidote available to that toxic organizational blame-shifting culture we see everywhere.
It provides an instantly compelling framework for instilling a necessary personal culture of accountability, of high standards within any team. That part is good, but its primary risk is structural, and it's dangerous. Its simplistic, monolithic design, that single pillar, is profoundly maladaptive when it's misapplied to complex systemic problems.
When the leader absorbs all the blame for systemic issues.
It leads directly to leadership burnout and churn. And critically, it actively neglects, even prevents, the necessary structural reforms that only the intellectual rigor of systems thinking can actually deliver.
So the final assessment, the takeaway, is that extreme ownership is a crucial component of effective leadership, maybe the foundational element of personal integrity and responsibility.
But must be integrated into a far more complex, nuanced, and system-aware architectural model. our cathedral concept.
We just have to be eternally wary of deceptively simple, single answers to organizational problems that are fundamentally complex and multi-layered. They're usually hiding something.
Okay, so the practical, immediate takeaway for you listening right now, how can you use this?
It's simple, but potentially revolutionary in application. The next time you encounter a major failure in your workplace, on your team, even in your personal projects,
Don't immediately jump to assign responsibility or take the blame blindly. Pause.
instead, use the diagnostic question first. Is the root cause of this failure primarily an individual error, a team coordination breakdown, or a flawed system?
Diagnose before you prescribe.
Your leadership act, your ownership, must then correspond precisely to that answer.
If the system is broken, owning it means fighting to fix the structure. It means securing resources, redesigning the workflow, implementing Deming's principles.
It does not just mean standing up, apologizing for the bad results, and then moving on, leaving the broken system intact for the next person. That's not real ownership.
Owning the real problem.
That's contextual ownership. And that's our deep dive for this week.
Remember, the most dangerous illusion is the one you don't know you're in. We challenge powerful narratives because questioning dogma is the only path to better understanding.
But now you know. You have the tools to see past the single pillar and recognize the entire structural flaw, or at least ask the right questions. So here's our question for you.
Where in your own work or life have you seen extreme ownership used not as a tool for solving problems, but as a weapon?
A weapon to blame individuals for systemic failures. Think about the last time someone was maybe fired or penalized to protect a bad budget, a flawed strategy, or a toxic culture.
Let us know in the comments. Question the narrative. Deconstruct the dogma. See the system.
We'll see you next time. Stay skeptical. Thank you for joining us.